Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of Intro to Folk Studies. I hope you all had a good first week and enjoyed getting into some of the introductory content for this course. I wanted to say thank you all for your introductory emails. I enjoyed getting to know a little bit about you, learning some things about your backgrounds, about your academic interests and your personal lives as well. Also, for the most part, everyone did a great job on their discussion board posts, the first discussion board posts that were due Friday of last week. I was especially impressed with some of the responses that you all were giving to one another and some of the discussion threads that were being created there. It was great to see folks, for example, in their replies to classmates, again, making those specific connections back to the text to bring in another point or to connect to another point from the reading or the lectures that you saw a classmate building on. So thanks for doing that and keep up the good work there. It was also fun to see many of the personal connections that people were making in your reading, kind of discovering what folklore includes and realizing that it includes a lot of things that you all do and know about and have as part of your daily lives. So it was great to see you making those connections to your personal lives. A couple general points, just kind of thinking about moving forward to the next discussion board posts. One, there still were a handful of folks who did not follow one of the specific prompts. So if you have not done so yet, please be sure to go to the assignments folder, look at the discussion board requirements, make sure you've read those 3 bullet points that outline specifically what I'm asking you to do there. So some people were sort of making that personal connection between something they read and something in their lives, but not necessarily following one of those 3 prompts, which if you'll remember are to make a connection between 2 different lectures or between a lecture and a reading or film, or to pose a question that you have a sort of discussion question based on the things that you're learning. So again, make sure you review those 3 options and stick to those, like many of you did very well in the discussion board posts to come. Another general response to your posts, some folks were wondering about the distinctions between folklore and popular culture. Chloe had some really great specific responses to those with some examples. So if you hadn't seen her posts, make sure to go back and read those, and she kind of spells out some examples to think about where you can see folklore and pop culture overlapping and diverging. In general, I'll just add that it's important to think about 2 things that distinguish these 2 areas of culture. One is the idea of transmission, so how folklore is shared versus how popular culture is shared. And folklore tends to be shared more on a personal basis, right? In small groups, face-to-face, person-to-person, something you're hearing or learning from someone you know often. That's kind of the general rule of thumb. Whereas pop culture, the transmission, you can think about being on a much broader scale, right? Everyone goes to see a movie. That movie comes out, millions of people see it at the same time, right? So you're not getting that sort of small scale within small groups, person-to-person transmission. So that's one thing, the transmission, that difference between small groups and kind of mass media distribution, right? Another difference is not just transmission, but also the idea of, we could call it duration, right? So folklore tends to kind of change more slowly over time. As you know, we did learn about how it's dynamic, right? So it does change, but those changes tend to be kind of in smaller increments, right? And folklore tends to be of a more kind of long-lasting nature, right? Whereas pop culture, you have fads, trends, popular music, popular movies, all these kinds of different media that come and go really quickly. So just think about those as the 2 main distinguishing factors, right? Transmission and duration, and that might help to kind of sort out some confusion there. Another point that many folks were noticing in the reading was being sort of surprised at the broad scope of folklore. So in other words, at all of the things that it does include. So I just wanted to respond to that by saying, yes, that is true, but also just keep in mind that doesn't mean that everything is folklore, as that kind of tends to be sometimes the direction people want to go with that. There are things that are not folklore, right? Pop culture is one of them. But also, if you'll just maybe go back, if you're having some confusion, or really at any point during the semester or the term, it's a good idea to kind of go back and revisit particularly that slide in the very first lecture that gives a list of the 8 qualities or characteristics of folklore. And that can help really kind of when you're starting to get confused or think about, well, is this folklore, is it not? If it matches with a few of those things on that list, then that can help you determine that thing is in fact folklore, right? So those qualities were that folklore is communal, common, informal, marginal, personal, traditional, aesthetic, and ideological. So, and there's some notes on that slide about what those terms mean, but just keep that list in mind as we're moving through the term to help you kind of sort out what is folklore and what is not. Okay, so those are my general comments on the work that you all did from last week. I wanted to also look ahead at a few things that are coming up this week. You do have a second discussion board post due, as well as a second quiz. So those are on the readings and lectures that you'll find on Blackboard again this week. If anyone's running into any problems, kind of confusion about the way things are working, hopefully in week 2 you'll kind of hit your rhythm. But if you are feeling stuck or you're not sure that you're doing something right, please again reach out to us sooner rather than later. But the other thing that's happening this week is you're going to start to learn about your projects. This is your final research project. And these projects, I hope, are something that you're going to have a lot of fun with. It's a different kind of research. It's something that's very hands-on, and that usually students kind of find an opportunity to really enjoy doing this kind of research. So I hope that that's your experience as well. So the lectures and readings for this week will address this basic idea of ethnographic fieldwork. And that's going to be the type of research, the methodology that you're going to be using in your final research project. So you'll learn what that means, but essentially it means you're going out, you're talking to people, you're observing people, and that's your data, right? So rather than analyzing something in a book or doing an experiment in a lab, you're gathering information from kind of hands-on, empirical, person-to-person, face-to-face research, okay? So in your lectures and readings, you're going to learn how to do that in the most productive and also the most ethical way, because working directly with people kind of raises some ethical questions, right? We want to make sure that we're always being respectful, mindful of how the kinds of things that we're doing and writing about might affect people. So those issues will be addressed in the content for this week. However, you also need to look at, and this is on your syllabus, but just to kind of give you a heads up, you also need to look this week at all of the documents and links that are in the research project folder. So that's under assignments. There's a folder for the final research project. And in that folder, you'll find, for example, the project requirements. So a document that spells out exactly what you need to be doing, both at this early research stage and then later on as you're writing your paper, because this research will result in a 4 to 5 page paper. Okay. So you'll find in that folder, in that project folder, the requirements, the rubric, some additional links to resources, sample transcript, which is a thing that you're going to have to create, which the document will spell out a little bit more. A link to borrowing recording equipment if that's something that you need to do for your field work. So all of those resources are there in that folder for you. Okay. In general, this project is you identifying a group, okay? And you can think back to your reading last week about what makes a folk group, right? So a group that shares a common factor, that comes together, that has traditions and customs that they share. So many of you may belong to these groups already, and that's fine to work with a group that you belong to. You may also know someone who belongs to a group like this, and that's fine as well, okay? The main things are that this group has shared culture and that you have access to them in the next few weeks, because what you're doing once you identify your group is you're conducting an observation. So in person, you are going to watch this group as they are interacting with one another. So that might be at a meeting that they have, at an event that they have, at a practice, at a rehearsal, a game night, whatever kind of interaction that this group regularly has, you're going to go and observe them and take notes with their permission, okay? The second thing is you will be conducting an interview with a member of that group. That could be someone you know. It could be someone that you kind of notice in your observations seems to have a very key role that you want to learn more about, so you might approach them for an interview. But in any case, you are conducting an interview after you conduct your observation, that's important that you do it in that order, because your interview is going to provide you an opportunity to ask kind of follow-up questions about the kinds of things that you noticed in your observation. So that observation and that interview combined make up your research, your field work, okay, your ethnographic field work. Then once those are done, you're moving on to writing your 4 to 5 page formal paper where you are describing the shared culture of this particular folk group. Right? What are their traditions? What's important to them? How did they form? So it's the document in the project folder, the requirements, spells out exactly what you should be looking for in the observation, kinds of things you should be asking about in your interview, what you should be writing about in your paper. But it's important to remember, bottom line is you're looking to connect your observations about this group with the things that we are learning about in class, right? So, for example, we just learned about how folk groups form. You just read about that last week, right? So in your paper, you might quote that part of the book saying this is how folk groups form, and then connect that to your observations. This is how I observed this particular folk group forming in these ways, right? Same goes for example, processes of field work. How did you use the specific methods that we learned about in class? You might write about later, as we're learning in the next coming weeks, specific traditions like foodways or costumes or rituals, right? How are you seeing those genres or types of folklore being enacted within your specific group, okay? So again, all about kind of connecting your observations back to what we're learning in terms of folklore in the course. So the project is due the last week of class. Monday, March 5th is the due date. So that gives you about 5 weeks, which might feel like a lot, but it's going to go quickly. And you need to start now because this piece of ethnographic fieldwork that is a little bit tricky is coordinating with other people's schedules, right? So making sure that you are able to observe this group. You know, they may not be meeting right away, or they might have a meeting this week and then not again for 3 weeks, right? It would be better for you to kind of get that going now. So make sure that you're starting this week to identify that group and start to think about when you can time that observation and interview to get your research underway in order to complete the project in time. This is not the kind of research project that you can kind of do on your own in the library the night before it's due. So I'm asking you this week to kind of get things rolling, that you email Chloe and I, again, just shoot us a quick email, letting us know what group you're thinking about. So this way you can get a little feedback, you know, whether we think the direction you're going is going to be productive. We want you to be set up for success. So if I see major red flags, or if Chloe does with kind of what you're thinking about doing, we can let you know early before you get started. Also, it just lets me know that you are starting to think about the process and to get things moving, and that you won't, you know, be running out of time at the end to get the project done. So again, please send me and Chloe an email this week, just briefly identifying what group you're thinking about using for your project or thinking about working with, and observing and interviewing and writing about, okay? You're not, if you end up changing your mind next week, that's okay. You're not going to be tied forever to whatever you put in an email this week, but I would at least like you to start thinking about it, okay? So again, hope everyone is off to a good start this week. Get in touch if you have questions or concerns, especially as we start thinking about the project. And otherwise, I will talk to you all soon. Take care.